Hi folks, here we go with chapter 13. In this chapter we're going to see some really interesting stuff where ancient architectural forms from Greece and Rome are adapted to the use for churches. In one of the first examples we're going to see a church that looks like a Roman commemorative arch. This is very different than what happened in the Gothic era, and it's one of the examples of how Renaissance architects were dredging up these old architectural forms, and their resurrection of them was so successful we have them to the present day. We're going to examine how some artists were more affected by concepts of the Renaissance, the 5 kinds of perspective, than others. And we're also going to see how some of these artists attempted to implement these techniques, but perhaps not very successfully. One of the examples we're going to see is a brother Angelico and the frescoes that he made that show that he really had a handle on perspective, but he kept his drawings and his frescoes simple, because he abided by the Gothic ethic of the simplicity of a piece of art to tell a religious story. We're also going to see an example of perspective gone awry, an artist who overused it essentially because he was so fascinated with it, did some very good work in foreshortening, but some of his work seems a bit artificial because of his over-reliance on perspective and his lack of implementation of some of the other techniques of perspective that were becoming known and available. Finally, we're going to look at some monumental pieces of art that display some of the other types of perspective. Chiaroscuro, for example, light perspective, giving depth to an image that's really flat by the way light is used and light is displayed. And we're going to wind up with a look at illumination, how it progressed, that is manuscript illumination, and how even in these tiny drawings that were included to illustrate biblical passages, perspective is creeping in. Background is creeping in, the use of linear perspective. The whole emphasis seems to be to make things more realistic, to draw the reader and the viewer into the scene as a means of making them relate to the scene much better and imparting the feeling of the biblical scene as envisioned by the artist.